I would like to explain just slightly what exactly is the Athens Development and Destination Management Agency. It's actually through this agency that the municipality of Athens is implementing several European programs, which one of which is the accommodation scheme for refugees and asylum seekers. In this project, I work as a social scientist, and I also contribute with several other activities regarding, for example, the quality control of our project and the complaint system we have implemented for beneficiaries to the program. I would first like to give you a brief presentation of the situation in Greece. I think most of you are already aware of the situation in my country. Except for the huge numbers, as people like to state, we also have, and that is something that is usually not said, we do have a tradition in receiving migrants and also in being a migrant population. This is something we tend to forget, but I would like to remind everyone that since the 19th we have been receiving non-nationals in Greece, and that is why we should have been more prepared, especially after the 2014-15 peak in newcomers, in the flow of asylum seekers and migrants coming to the country. However, there is no specific social orientation of any type at the national level. There are no obligatory language courses for migrants or any sort of a provision for migrants, asylum seekers and refugees to have access to certificating language courses, nor, as in Austria, for example, value courses and things like that. And that is why when you are a newcomer without any supporting network, it is really, really very complicated to integrate the local community. There are, as it has already said, in several EU countries, migration policies that have focused on integration issues over the years and have adapted, fine-tuned and adapted these policies for the asylum seekers. We don't. We have migration policies, but they are not integration-oriented yet. And that is why it is not possible for Greece at the national or local level to use, let's say, tools or policies that have been designed for migrants to the asylum seekers or beneficiaries of international protection. However, there are efforts that have been made in the national political level, but also in the different municipalities. I will talk about the Athens Municipality in a while. I would just like to give a brief, also some numbers about asylum seekers in Greece. In the last decade, the numbers have skyrocketed in terms of non-nationals, whether they are migrants, asylum seekers, or recognized refugees. I will give some numbers that you can find on the UNHCR data sheets. So in 2014, just to give you an idea, we had 43,300 arrivals, both from sea and land. In 2015, the number went up to 861,630 arrivals. And then 2016, about 180,000 arrivals, to 36,000 in 2017, and a slight increase again in 2018 with 50,500 arrivals, again from the sea or the northern borders, land and sea arrivals. In May 12 of the current year, we were at 11,800 arrivals. So there is a decrease in numbers, but that doesn't mean that there is a huge, immense change in the political efforts or the local efforts in terms of integration or even in terms of emergency relief. I will get to that later. The most common nationalities are Afghani, 47% of new arrivals are from Afghanistan, Iraqi people, 14%, Syria, Palestine, and I will also mention Congo because they have a percentage of 5.9%, almost 6%. In the newcomers are from Congo, and this is, let's say, a small change in the demographics because now we have African populations This is a new challenge because of the language. It's French-speaking people in the biggest majority, and it adds up in the difficulties to provide basic services due to the lack of interpretation, but I will come into further details. Another interesting figure is the asylum applications. In 2018, there were 66,970 asylum applications, whereas the year before, in 2017, there were 58,642 asylum applications. Small parenthesis, there is a very big delay in treating the asylum applications. People can now wait for almost 2 years to have their first decision. If it's a rejection, to go to a second degree, an appeal, it can go to 3 or 4 years. In the meantime, they do not have access to important things, and they are generally not aware of their fundamental rights nor benefit from any social orientation courses. However, I will give you also an overview of what the municipality of Athens has been working on for the last 3-4 years in order to provide basic services and, let's say, get near to having a social orientation organized course or a curriculum in Athens. There has been a change in the political response, a very slight one, because Greece and Athens, but Greece in generally, is very much focused on emergency relief and not integration or mid-term, long-term development-wise policies. That means that the Greek national and institutional actors mostly have to deal with how to react for this very, let's say, it's always presented by the media as a huge number of people arriving to a country that is actually currently in economic, social, and political subtlety context. There has been, in the late 2018, a national integration strategy that the Ministry for Migration Policy has drafted and put under public consultation. It is a strategy that focuses on the ways in which all policy levels, central, regional, and locals, and all actors, whether they are national authorities, local authorities, NGOs, private sector, etc., could cooperate in order to overcome the difficulties in handling the situation and offering integration procedures. It, however, highlights the role of local authorities because municipalities have already, but will have a growing and crucial role to play in the management of diversity and migrant or asylum seekers, refugees integration. It's actually the tendency that local authorities and especially municipalities take over programs, accommodation schemes, and other projects related to the migrant and asylum seekers, refugees integration in the country. That is why for the last 3-4 years, municipalities have been active and have been working on drafting policies and planning response projects, and anyway, also networking a lot, trying to find cooperations, build cooperations, and use in the best effective way the actors that have been working on the field already, such as NGOs and international organizations. Today, the social orientation activities are mainly handled by the NGOs still. I will get to that after presenting the tools of the Athens Municipality. There are other municipalities of big cities such as Thessaloniki, Larissa. There are 12 municipalities in the country that are working on integration, have been cooperating with actors on the field in order to plan the next steps for those people who will be staying in Greece, recognized refugees that will be one day, let's say, hopefully active citizens somehow. But still we're very, very far from that, because the state has been focusing on issues such as the decongestion of islands, the decompression of the camps, especially Moria camp in Lesbos, that probably all of you have already heard about. So every time there is a small step in the integration path, something happens that takes all the focus on emergency relief, whether it's a new flow of incoming people in the camps on the islands, or, because it's also important that it's said, a new mediatization of the situation in the camps, mainly in the islands, where the living conditions are, I can't even characterize them, but let's say it's a very difficult situation, and we have been under, we as a country, Greece has been under a huge amount of pressure on the local level, people living on the islands having to deal with this phenomenon every day, but also on an international and media level, with the mediatization that these issues take. The municipality of Athens has been offering information and important basic tools for inclusion in the Greek society through the social services that have been already functioning for the Greek people in need. There has been some innovation. There have been specifically two important tools that have been that have been working for the last at least 1.5 years, let's say 2 years, that I will briefly present. And of course, the basic welfare services that have been managed by the municipality traditionally, like municipal health clinics, for example, are also available and open to asylum seekers and refugees. So currently, the main municipality of Athens tools are the Athens Coordination Center for Migrants and Refugees, also known as ACCMR, the Migrant Integration Center, also known as KEM, the Migrant Integration Council, also known as SEM, and the Center for Reception and Solidarity, also known as KIADA. The Athens Coordination Center for Migrants and Refugees, the ACCMR, is actually the most active municipal tool currently. It operates in June 2017 on a private foundation fund. The aim is the efficient coordination between municipal authorities and stakeholders operating within the city. It could be NGOs, international organizations, migrant and refugee community groups, or other smaller volunteer active groups. These meetings, because it's about meetings, focus on integration and on the exchange of good practices and know-how. They also work on preparing for the emergency relief at the municipal level. There has been, for example, a preparedness and response mechanism for effective contingency planning in case of emergency that was drafted and published in the earlier this year. It's the result of a brainstorming and exchange between the participants of the ACCMR in how to avoid situations that we have met and dealt with in the past few years in case of very important flow of newcomers in the country, especially in the islands. But due to this political need of decompressing the islands, that has the obvious effect of bringing people to Athens as a first stop, the municipality of Athens has actually worked on how to respond to the potential very sudden and very important flow of people arriving in the city. How does the ACCMR work? There are 6 working committees. Each committee, as I already said, is constituted by municipal but also other factors NGOs, international organizations, etc., working on the field. The 6 working committees focus on housing, employment, health, education, legal support, and gender aspects. There are over 90 members, and they meet according to the needs every week, every 2 weeks, or every month. I have colleagues from the accommodation scheme of the Municipality of Athens who are participating to the education working committee, because we try to create smaller groups within our accommodation scheme that will focus on integration issues in order to transition eventually in a more integration-orientated program, more than a basic need housing emergency relief program. And I can most definitely confirm that there's a lot of work that has been made. Unfortunately, the results of the work in each of the committees is still not very obvious, because it's mainly recommendations and planning future projects. But in the field of education, there have been some important steps made that I will detail in a while. The ACCMR has also created a digital platforms. I heard something similar from our colleague from the Bulgarian Council for Refugees and Migrants. The ACCMR has created this digital platform where refugees, asylum seekers, migrants, but anyone who's interested can go online and see, according to their needs, which organizations or which municipal social services can provide what. This is a great tool. There are other tools, similar tools like refugee.info, that also are available to these populations that have been working for more time, and are also actually translated in all languages, which is not the case for the ACCMR platform. I'm giving this example to show that there are steps that are being made, but still they need to be, let's say, more effective for the people that they are actually concerning. The next tool is the CEM, the Migrant Integration Center. Again, it's a very good step towards integration, because what happened is that the municipality of Athens, together with all other municipalities of the country, found themselves in a very important momentum in terms of political direction, because there has to be a shift. They cannot anymore focus only on emergency relief, because asylum seekers coming into the country, even though there's a big amount of people live in the country in different ways, there's also a big important amount of people staying in the country, and mainly in Athens. These people need to be supported in their integration. These people need to have access to basic services and need to benefit from fundamental rights, such as the access to health, education, and so on. In this perspective, the CEM is actually a local point of reference for the provision of specialized services for migrant and services. There is the relevant KEP, which is actually the same tool for Greek nationals. It's a one-stop shop where Greek citizens can go and fulfill some administrative procedures. So, copying this example, we have the CEM, which is the same for migrants and refugees, and asylum seekers for some very specific administrative procedures. So, in the papers, the CEM provides provision of information and support in relation to the administrative procedures, psychosocial support and counseling, legal counseling, submission of applications for social benefits such as the social solidarity income, networking and referrals to NGOs for even more specialized services and needs, language courses, Greek and English, individual and professional counseling sessions, and intercultural activities. Unfortunately, the CEM is not still at most of its efficiency. it is understaffed. The lessons only began a month ago, and in a very, very restricted number of places. Interpretation is provided only for Arabic-speaking people or Urdu-speaking people. And the legal counseling, the professional counseling, etc., are still not actually provided. There is an explanation for that. I will give you just, I don't want to go into very much details, but the explanation is that at the same time that the municipality was working on the integration process and the integration services that had to be set up and offered to asylum seekers and refugees, there has been a parallel decision from the same Ministry of Migration Policy, which is to start terminating the accommodation for refugees that have been recognized for over 18 months, what that means in practice is that refugees that have received the residency in 2017 are gradually asked to leave the housing, leave the apartment, find their own accommodation, and they can still benefit from a 3 months allowance. This created a very big reaction in all the actors, whether they are NGOs implementing the accommodation scheme in partnership with the UNHCR or municipalities implementing the same accommodation scheme. This also gives another perspective in the eventual emergency that will have to be dealt in the very, obviously, if immediately, it's the increasing number of people that will potentially be found on the streets and the increase of homelessness. That is why small steps in integration are have to sometimes be put aside in order to focus on how to solve immediate needs and how to prevent, let's say, more basic issues that can have a multiple and multi-level effects on the Greek society and on the municipalities. So for now, the CHEM, to come back to this tool, is starting to work. They receive people. They have worked through the ACCMR. They have worked with actors working in the field of accommodation in order to overcome the immediate problems that will appear with this eviction of refugees after the termination of their accommodation. I will skip numbers regarding the accommodation scheme because it's not important. What's important is that from our standpoint as an accommodation scheme of the municipality of Athens that is closely linked to the municipality's tools working in the field and for integration and emergency relief, I'm just going to give a very short list of the challenges that we meet. I think everybody will be familiar with these issues. It's the lack of state means and infrastructures, the very insufficient interpretation at all levels. This, of course, brings a risk of marginalization of the beneficiaries of these services. Extremely limited accommodation, own accommodation in the center city, so no apartments to rent, in brief. There is also a very important problem in terms of the complete lack of projects, including local communities, and strengthening, for example, the community groups themselves. There is this political debate between emergency relief versus development policies. It's very difficult to adopt one or the other because of the constantly changing international context. Very limited access to labor market. Huge difficulties in accessing and following the national educational system, regardless the steps that have been made also in education with the specific teams working on how to subscribe refugees refugees' children and asylum seekers at school. So small steps are being made, but still we are in a very difficult position of constantly having to deal with other priorities related to emergency relief rather than social orientation. Thank you.
Благодаря.